Nowadays, the word classic seems to be quite overused. Classic video games, classical music, the classic taste of your favorite candy bar, or the classical era. But does anybody even know what it means?
The best definition I found in the good book is as follows. An outstanding example of a particular style, something of lasting worth, or with a timeless quality, something that exemplifies its class. A fine definition indeed. To me, classic is a synonym of purity, a final blueprint that the future things take inspiration from, and will always be serviceable no matter the passage of time. So yeah, pretty much the same. But why am I boring you with this stuff? Well...
In 2016, Nintendo announced and then soon after released the NES Classic Edition. Basically, a plug-and-play emulation box containing 30 well-known NES titles enclosed in a neat plastic shell in the shape of the console it was based on, but about 1/3 of its size. Despite the fact that there were similar plug-and-plays before and they were terrible, people were genuinely hyped. It made for a cool collectible, it looked nice on a shelf, the emulation was competent, and the list of games, while really safe, contained straight-up hits. Well, mostly. Not everyone can be a winner. The worst thing about it was the very limited print of the gadget, which caused unreasonable price hikes. Thanks, Nintendo. 1 year later, encouraged by their previous success, they went for a repeat by releasing the Super Nintendo Classic. And it was even better, despite having 10 games less. Well, 9, as they added Star Fox 2, a previously unreleased game, a real treat for every hardcore gamer around. They even learned and produced more units than they did with the NES. Scalpers were unfazed though. Since the first announcement of the NES Classic, everyone waited for Sony's move, creating lists of most wanted games and whatnot. And Sony eventually made their move, over 2 years after the NES Classic, when the idea kind of lost its novelty. Don't get me wrong, people still were kind of excited about it. I remember talking with my med school buddy after the full game list was leaked. It went something like this.
Man, Sony is finally going to release that darned thing. Can't wait.
Man, you've seen the game list? It's something.
What do you mean? PS1 library was great. I'm sure it's fine.
I mean, look at it. Look.
It's not that bad. You're overreacting. You know, that was perhaps the first major cope of my life. I completely repressed my disappointment when looking at the list for the first time. Because, let's face it, we all were disappointed with it, and it is still a bit of a laughingstock to this day. PlayStation Classic felt rushed, even when released so late after its competitor. It lacked many beloved titles, the emulator it was running was mediocre at best, and some genius thought that including PAL versions of some games was a great idea, especially for a fast-paced fighting game. At least it looked nice, but for the price they initially asked for, yeah, nope. While NES and SNES classics were practically impossible to get thanks to their quality and popularity, PS classics were rotting on the store shelves. I bought mine in 2019 new, half-priced, with one of my first payouts, and while it went up in price, it still never reached the levels of what you would have to shell out for Nintendo ones. And sure, PS Classic is really easy to hack and play any PS1 ROM that you would want to play, but honestly, if you want to emulate, just use your PC. May I interest you in DuckStation, Steam Deck, or just build your own emulation box, as PS Classic is really mediocre at doing what it was made to do. And while you get 2 controllers, they are just standard ones, because analog controls would be too expensive, I suppose. They are completely fine, but they are lighter and the plastic is definitely cheaper than in the originals. Then again, there's a reason why they didn't include DualShocks with the console, and it is kind of embarrassing. Anyway, I wanted to look at the PS Classic and its library once again and see for myself if the choice of games they've picked is really that bad. I'll do that by going through the list alphabetically, reviewing each game and putting them into nice and clear tiers. Starting with the highest, titles synonymous with PS1, offering a supreme experience, a true class in the genre they represent, able to captivate even those who normally aren't interested in games of this type. In a perfect world, PlayStation Classic would only contain titles of this tier. Games of amazing quality that are overall a great time, hampered only by some minor faults or being too niche to be considered truly god tier. They have some visible faults that negatively influence the overall feel, but are otherwise still pretty good games, well capable of being entertaining from start to finish. Or, as I like to call them, games for connoisseurs. They still can be competent as sources of fun, but there are just so many games that are straight up better than them that it really feels like the spot is wasted on any of them. Still, I wouldn't be surprised if any of them had a small but dedicated fanbase. Disastrous disappointments that were made completely redundant by other games, often from the same series, or just weren't that fun to play from the beginning of their sad existence. Just thinking about them makes me angry. All games will be judged on obvious things like audio-video, controls, and how good they are to actually play, but also their place in the PlayStation's history, how rare and expensive they are to get nowadays, and whether they still hold up when compared with the eventual successors. Because these 20 spots are extremely valuable and have a $100 starting price, you would want the best. Oh, and yeah, I could probably talk about each game for like 10 minutes or more, as I always do, but then you would stop watching this crap. Thanks for not clicking it away for so long anyway, boss. And I would die having to do voiceovers and editing, so I'll try to keep it up to 4 minutes or less for each game. Well, there will be like 2 that will run for longer for private reasons or because I'll mention things about the console itself. Also, I replayed these games for just 1 hour to refresh my memory of them, again for the sake of my time and sanity. But believe me, I've played these games enough back in the day.
Remember that while I'm going to try to keep my biases from influencing the final score, it will still probably vary from your opinion. If you have a problem with that, well, maybe take a dictionary of your own and look up the word subjectivity. Okay, let's start with...
Oh, what a way to start. It's bad, really bad, and it was like that even at its release. People just didn't really know that, being charmed by the fancy polygonal magic of Sony's box. Because yeah, I'll admit it, the game looked quite pretty for a very early PlayStation title, and the music is quite decent too. The voice work... not so much. Each of the 10 fighters plays very differently from the others, but there are clear winners and losers. I wouldn't mind the smaller roster if not for the fact that their movesets are downright anemic, and good luck pulling out any of the 3 or 4 special moves without looking into the game's manual. The fights feel really slow, are not really interesting to look at, and you'll just get angry at how janky and slow everything feels. It was the first truly 3D fighting game that allowed the players to move around the opponent, but otherwise the gameplay is laughably shallow. The only thing that the game has for itself is being one of the Western launch titles for the console and the first true 3D fighter, but it's a bit like with most films from the early days of cinema. They are interesting curios, but not exactly something that I would like to engage with on a regular basis or be put as a part of an expensive compilation. Continuing with the analogy, your experience will be short and there won't be much to come back to, thanks to no additional modes or unlocks, and the character endings leave a lot to be desired. In the game's defense, newer Toshinden games weren't much better, and the other fighting game available at launch, that is, Street Fighter, the movie, the game, was even worse. It's a D, and a terrible one. Don't you even dare force anyone to play it with you, you sadist.
Cool borders! Here we go!
When looking at the list, everybody was salty that it wasn't a game from certain other extreme sports series that was very popular during the PlayStation's run. It's both understandable, as those games were great and made the genre extremely popular, but also I find it quite hurtful for Cool Borders, even if it's a polar opposite of the not mentioned series. I'm really happy that someone was smart enough to skip the first one, which was a glorified tech demo and wasn't received all that well in lieu of the actually finished product that was Cool Borders 2. Don't get me wrong, the game is still an acquired taste and demands a lot from the player. You'll fail, and then fail, and fail some more, until slowly you start making progress. Consulting the game's manual is a must, as there's no tutorial or trick list when playing the game, other than these vignettes on loading screens written in the ever-elegant Comic Sans. The game is stylish as hell, well deserving of the adjective cool. Shredding feels heavy and does not forgive, so you have to keep it cool and make calculated decisions while going downhill. Tracks aren't long, but are twisty, full of trees and jumps, and will keep you on your toes. Your initial position in the race depends on how well you'll do in the big air competition, similarly to a qualifications lap in other racing games. I didn't really like it. The trick system in the game is really extensive, but pulling them out is janky and unresponsive. I had better luck just button mashing trick combos instead of thinking them out. And it's really hard to get to the contenders starting ahead of you, so most of the time you'll end up in the position you've started with. Then again, the feeling of catching up to someone who started before you is amazing, and I've never felt so good after finishing third as I did in this game. And the CPU opponents do make mistakes. They are not flawless, so there's always a chance for you. Seeing the progress you make is satisfying and feels good. It motivates you to play more. But again, it is extremely demanding, which makes the game's two-player mode a big question mark. Still, I think that with two players of a similar skill level who know what to do, the game could be a blast. I like it. Perhaps way more than I should, but I think that because of its unfriendliness, small amount of content, and it being a PAL version. By the way, there are two camps when it comes to Cool Borders fans, those who like 2 and those who like 3 and 4. Later installments were made by a completely different studio with a new physics engine, causing the game to have a different feel overall. Through my whole life I was in the second camp, and I genuinely liked CB3, but spending more time with 2, I changed my mind. It's worth giving this game a chance. It's definitely not for the vast majority of people, but it has that weird factor that will make you love it if you give it more time and attention.
It's the first race of the season. Go!
You know, my whole life I thought it was a Western launch title, but no, it wasn't. It came close to that date, but it wasn't a launch title. It's extremely basic, with only 3 modes, 3 available cars and 6 tracks, plus 1 arena. I thought I was going to hate it because of how antiquated it is, but no. Actually the game, despite being very rough around the edges and minimalistic, is fun to play. Graphics are quite impressive for what the game is. There are 20 cars taking part in the race or derby, and despite that, the framerate remains quite stable. Though that is kind of hurt by the PS Classic using the PAL version of the game. The driving model takes getting used to as cars feel heavy, but then again, that makes taking part in destruction all the more satisfying. Each car has several zones that can be damaged when hitting them. Damage actually changes how the car drives, so after a while they become uncontrollable messes or just stop working altogether, acting as an obstacle on the track for the remaining contenders.
Pro tip: protect your front.
Hitting things straight on is a really bad idea, as that's where the engine is. Tracks are narrow and often intersect, so there will be a lot of contact. But it's fun! Outside of normal races, there's a mode where you have to cause chaos and destruction, because while you still get points for position if you manage to finish the race, you'll get a lot more of them by just smashing the opponents up. Being first in that mode can be quite detrimental, to be honest. And then there's Bowl, where you wreck other cars and try to survive for as long as you can. Championship mode is really short, but doesn't overstay its welcome. Sadly, The only thing you get as a reward is the cathedral cost. And then there's multiplayer, which doesn't work on PS Classic because you can't link two consoles. Yeah, Destruction Derby is so resource heavy that split screen would kill the original PlayStation, so one of the main features is gone. Well, the game is genuinely fun. I had such a good time that I'm a bit ashamed of it. Sequels make it completely redundant, and it doesn't even have the excuse of being a launch title. Very well deserved. While the sequel also required linking, Destruction Derby Raw, the best game of this type in my opinion, had a split screen mode. Such a shame and wasted potential. I mean, like it or not, it was the game that secured Sony's early win in that generation's console war. The PlayStation's era Squaresoft, or just Square before the spirits within, was both very prolific and experimental, and FF7 was a grand foray into this new age. It still contained the well-known and loved elements of the series, but also introduced new, revolutionary ideas like limit breaks or the nearly endless battle customization options thanks to the materia system. Not to mention the dystopian dieselpunk setting, highly contrasting with 6 previous installments. While the 3D models were quite awkward, the Popeye-armed characters became iconic and still are remembered fondly. Backgrounds and locations are top-notch in my opinion. Despite their low resolutions, they ooze with details, imagination and soul. Plot and characters have their detractors, but I think that the game still holds high with its theming, world building and high stakes. You really care for the characters and the world they inhabit. You want them to succeed and strive. Sure, the translation is really wonky, but I wouldn't want it any other way. It's definitely a part of the game's charm for me. Battles are a fairly standard JRPG affair, but you're given a lot of tools to break encounters in half. I think that they couldn't really make the transition from old Final Fantasies to the new era better than they did with what we got here. It is truly timeless, but I'm sure you already know that. Actually, the worst thing about Final Fantasy VII is the aftermath of its success. With that many spin-offs and other media, the original's legacy got kind of diluted. Which is sad, as it's a game that introduced and indoctrinated many to this crazy shit show called JRPGs, including yours truly. I know this genre, and Final Fantasy VII has obvious problems and is probably bad for me, but to hell with that. Tier is the only place where you could put such an important game, even when it has as many haters as those who love it. It's far from my favorite game of this genre, but I respect and adore it nonetheless.
Good shot, kid. I think you got him. Good shot, kid. I think you got him.
Speeding all around, the Naked 47 got the power and it's bound to move any mother that gets in the way. Just another power machine on the freeway. Trying with me as my MC homeboy, knowing the rules ain't part of his program. Finding the right way around this map might be pretty pretty hard cause he's fucked on crack.
I think that the picture says more than 1,000 words. The original GTA can be fun for like 15 minutes of messing around, but then you either fail in a spectacular fashion and get frustrated, or just get bored. The controls are super awkward, all 3 cities are a mess to navigate, though I have to admit it gets better with time. And the game is completely unforgiving. But it has its charm, with witty writing and gameplay that was truly something new at the time. The music and sound effects are great too. Still, it's quite a puzzling pick. I mean, yeah, the series became a Sony staple after the 3rd installment was released. The game was well liked by the audience, not so much by the critics, and it generated quite a bit of noise around itself. But it's such an awkward little game that is made completely redundant by its much better sequel, which is genuinely great and improves everything about its predecessor. GTA is tough to love, but it offers a lot of challenging gameplay and secrets to discover, with some bright spots of fun to be found. Though the PS Classic version is hampered further by using a PAL version. Why? To make a game that's already choppy at times even slower? Still, it's a C. Oh, and I think that I've discovered why these cowards didn't include analog controllers in the package. If you turn on the analog mode in certain games, mostly the old ones, the inputs won't be recognized at all until you push the analog button again to turn it off. It's a really weird quirk of older games, and I think that they just didn't have enough faith in their consumer base to make that connection. Or it's just a money thing and getting the highest markup possible. But now, you know why the games sometimes don't allow you to do anything when you are using DualShock. They are just overwhelmed by the modes they weren't designed for. Also known as Kurushi in the PAL territories, a very abstract puzzle game with an incredibly heavy atmosphere, fueled further by an ominous orchestral score. Basically, you have to detonate cubes as they roll through the platform and not letting them fall. You do that by marking a panel, then waiting for the cube to roll onto it and activating the panel. Of course, it gets a bit more complicated with time, thanks to the introduction of advantage zones, which allow you to detonate more than one spot, although more often than not, you really don't want that. And forbidden cubes, which will punish you if you destroy them. Letting a normal cube fall down or destroying a forbidden cube will result in the last row of the platform collapsing. If you lose too many rows and fall down, well, that's game over for you. It's a fine puzzle game, but it takes a lot for it to get interesting. If you manage to last that long and get into the zone, though, you won't be disappointed. Then again, you have to suffer through the beginning stages. I would say that the concept is a bit too basic. Don't get me wrong, it works to a degree, and I just love the eerie feeling one has while playing it. The game is an experience, just not one that you'll want to repeat too often. After the game finishes, your intelligence is scored. Numbers are absurdly large, so don't take them too seriously. IQ, which isn't even that great of a meter, doesn't work that way. Do you think I would be this smart? Graphics are basic, but again they don't have to be anything more. In fact, the minimalistic visuals add to the atmosphere. There's a two-player mode, which is played with a single joypad, as it is pretty much a game of horse and seeing who will do best, with the controller changing hands. The game was very popular in Japan and to a lesser degree in Europe too, and I can see why. If you slog through the initial stages, it will just suck you up. There are other games that have a better connection with Sony and an actual multiplayer, but I respect them for smuggling this game in. For the boldness.
Jumping Flash!
Another launch game, but this time one that was and still is really good for a change, and to this day there's nothing like it. Well, not counting the sequel obviously. It's hard to even define what Jumping Flash really is. The best descriptor would be a 3D platformer where you control your character in first person, but even that seems kind of lacking. I wouldn't really call the game a shooter, as while you can shoot your enemies and there are even additional weapons that are kind of cool to use, you can solve most of your problems by jumping on them, and range combat is definitely not the main appeal of the game. Hell, your guns are weak enough that you'll deal more damage to bosses by skillfully jumping on them. Which makes sense when you consider the game's title. And yeah, bosses are quite impressive on the technical level and fun to fight against, even if they are on the easier side. Overall, the game is quite a relaxing experience, and the biggest danger to you is your lack of spatial awareness, causing you to fall off the level. Fitting for a game where you mostly jump. The levels aren't too big, but there's quite a lot of verticality thanks to the numerous platforms hanging around. Controls are intuitive and responsive, so every bad jump is on the player. The objective of each non-boss level is finding 4 jet pods in the shape of carrots, and then getting to the exit. Quite an easy task, as they tend to be placed in easily accessible spots, making levels take less than 5 minutes each. And sure, you could rush the game like that, but exploring these wacky worlds is the big part of why this game is so fun. One thing is the joy of finding bonus levels and secrets. The other is just soaking in the fantastic music and graphics. I mean, is there anything more PlayStation 1 than this? Jaggy shapes, washed out colors, pop-ins, it all makes the game so dreamlike. It's an incredibly cozy experience, and I think that every gamer should play it to completion at least once in their lives. You will enjoy it, and it will broaden your perspective. It's just about 1 hour, 1.5 of play at most, but you'll be craving more and keep returning. Simple, extremely charming, and unconventional. I'm so happy that of all obscure launch titles, they've picked Jumping Flash. Many people heard of it, maybe even played the demo, but completing it, well, now you have a chance. It's an nothing more, nothing less, just a really great original title. S tier, and the very top of it at that. Spoilers, MGS won't be dethroned. What? You want to know more? Is there even a point? Fine. MGS is the game that makes men out of boys and shapes adults into better specimens. With its plot that, despite various deep themes and sharp turns, manages to remain interesting and doesn't exhaust the audience. Gameplay that's intuitive, satisfying, with perhaps the best boss fights on the console, and beautiful direction, visuals and soundtrack that please the senses, topping it off with the amazing cast of characters that were voiced by true talents, no matter which language you were playing. Metal Gear Solid set new standards when it comes to video game quality and proved that, yes, video games are like any other media and can be considered art. And it achieved that without stooping to misery porn, hating the audience or blaring about the new hot social issue. It's a tale about a man who just does what he has to do, friendship and love blooming on the battlefield. Having respect and compassion for others, even if their worldviews clashes with yours. And finally, that the governments are horrible and they play with everyone's lives. I would love if the game was longer, as there's so much you can do, so many tools and mechanics you have at your disposal, yet not that many places to actually use them. But then again, I also think that the game is perfectly balanced as it is. And hey, if you want more, they released VR missions, which sadly isn't a part of the PlayStation Classic. I know that I'm glazing the game, but it's just that good, seriously. None of its magic was lost with time. While MGS2 perfected the gameplay formula, and the later installments gave players more options and freedom, MGS1 is still an absolute masterpiece, and I'm glad I was born in time to experience it wholly. It's so important to me, in fact, that being buried with my copy of the game is actually one of the 2 positions in my final will. The experience for true men. It's all about drilling a hole and then quickly, yet at the same time carefully exploring it. Okay. But seriously, again, a really simple concept. You want to drill as deep as you can before you suffocate from the lack of air, while trying not to get crushed by the literal weight of your mistakes. And while it is easy at first, because the air consumption is low while close to the surface, each deeper layer is more strenuous on our hero, Susumu. You can find air capsules as you go deeper, but getting to them often requires removing more blocks than you would want to, either wasting your time or making a rock slide that has a high chance of killing you in the process. Haste is your biggest enemy in Mr. Driller, yet at the same time, you actually really need it if you want to score high. Then there are these extra hard X-blocks that require multiple drills and release a poison that will drain 20% of your air, so you really want to manually break them only in true dire situations. The preferred way of removing them is making a group of 4. Colored blocks form groups when they come in contact with ones of the same color, and a single drill will remove them, often causing other blocks to lose support and fall down after a second. Loss of that structural integrity forces you to rush if you don't want to be squished, making for an adrenaline-pumping gameplay, something that you wouldn't suspect looking at the cute presentation. It's simple, it's great, and it's actually one of my favorite games ever. Sure, there's not much variety, just the bog standard arcade mode, where you want to get to the certain depth while getting as many points as possible, survival mode, which is drilling till you meet your demise, and time attack, which is more like a puzzle mode and is all about the route optimization. Oh, and the soundtrack is full of bangers too. I can't shield the game enough. It would be an easy if not for the fact that I have no idea why it is here. It's a fantastic game, but with no real connection to PlayStation or its legacy. It wasn't even an exclusive, as there was a nearly arcade-perfect Dreamcast version about a year prior to this. So while my heart is screaming at me, I can't let Mr. Driller out of the tier. Be sure to check it out. For me, this is one of the most impactful games on the PlayStation. From the moment I've seen the FMV that is beautifully made and yet so dark, depressing and haunting, including 2 seconds that are so messed up that I'm still not sure how they've managed to put it in, to the simple, on the surface yet really tough puzzle platformer that will test your wits, reflexes and willpower. While your main objective is just to escape and survive, over the course of the game you'll encounter 99 of Abe's brethren, some of them really deviously hidden, especially at the beginning of the game, whom you can save, which influences Abe's fate at the end. Or, you know, you can just lead them to their early demise. The game is source of black comedy gold.
Hello. Oops.
And it was the exact reason why I got it back in the day, because I was a sick fuck. I mean, there are so many hazards, traps, enemies. What's a better way to cheer yourself up after a crappy day than seeing others suffer? Anyway, may the divine force of your choosing have you in their care if you decide to go for all Mudokons saved, as the game has a big problem with checkpoint starvation, and a minor mistake will force you to sometimes repeat multiple secret rooms that are a lot more tricky than the obligatory path, which isn't a cakewalk by any means. This problem was luckily fixed in the sequel, as it is perhaps the only bad thing I have to say about the original. Well, and the fact that you can have only one Mudokon following you, which again was fixed in Exodus. Backgrounds are wonderful, the atmosphere heavy and oppressive, and the audio side mostly consists of brilliant ambience and farts. The level design is pretty amazing too, greatly using every tool that the player has and constantly challenging their knowledge about the game's mechanics. While the journey through Rapture Farms isn't too long, you never feel like the game is overstaying its welcome. And hey, after you go through it once, you can try to find and save everyone, or kill them, your choice. Despite its difficulty, the game feels fair, and each retry is nearly instantaneous, which is great because you'll be dying a lot. It's a strong While I do prefer Exodus, the game is really strong on its own, and I like it way more than the remake New and Tasty. Quality of life improvements weren't worth the loss of the original's gritty atmosphere, not at all. To this day, I remember my first reaction upon seeing screenshots from Rayman in the year 2000. Even after seeing what PS1 had to offer, I still was mightily impressed and wanted to play it just because it looked straight up like a cartoon. And the game still has this feeling of being like a playable animated movie with brilliant smooth animation, beautiful backgrounds, wacky character designs, and music that will speak to your soul. Rest in peace, Remy Gazelle. But then you actually start playing the game, and everything kinda falls apart. It's not that the game isn't playable or has horrible controls. No, it's extremely well done from a technical standpoint, and the levels are vast and smartly designed. But I got an overwhelming feeling that the developers fine-tuned the difficulty for themselves. Like, some jumps require pinpoint precision and/or prior knowledge of what the level has in store for the player. It feels like trial and error way too often, and the difficulty just keeps ramping up. Personally, the furthest I ever made to was the first level of Picture City, and from Let's Plays I've watched, I'm glad I didn't press on. Like, the difficulty spike between the first world and the second one is so high that I'm not sure how they ever thought it would be a good idea. But then again, skill issue. But I would really want to see one trying to break all the cages, which you need to finish the game, by the way, without a guide. Levels are full of many invisible switches that you just have to activate if you want to beat the game 100%. I'm sure that the activation jingle is like a PTSD trigger for many people who played the original Rayman. It's just tough, and to the hardcore levels. And that's a shame, because at some point it stops being satisfying. You'll just be glad that the horrible unbalanced part is over, just to encounter another one seconds later. And while Rayman was a launch title for the Western releases of PS1, I don't know. I already think about it as a game associated with the Atari Jaguar. It is a fantastic work of art and plays well, but it revels in kicking its players just a bit too much. I feel like they could have chosen a game that would be a much better fit for the role of colorful platformer.
C.
I'll start with the obvious. We all wish it was Resi 2, or hell, even Resi 3. The original was a groundbreaking game that deserves every bit of respect. It walked so the future survival horrors could run. And while it is still a perfectly enjoyable game, its successors are just plain better, and only a fool would choose this game over them if they had a choice. and it was made completely obsolete by the remake. While both 2 and 3 are so different from theirs that they are still valid choices despite the age. Okay, now that I've ripped the bandage, the main locations, the Spencer's mansion and then the lab, are large, sensibly designed with a lot of puzzles and exploration involved. You'll get lost and frustrated a lot, even with the map, but that's just a part of the game's charm. So is the limited inventory and small amount of precious resources you'll find. Managing inventory is pretty much a game in itself. Do you really need that healing item with you at all times? Is it smart to shoot your precious ammo to get rid of some monsters, or will you just try to save it for later and risk your health trying to juke and avoid them? Making decisions is interesting, and the game will constantly force you to make them. Is it scary? Well, the first encounter with a zombie is pretty disturbing, and you can get spooked by an enemy that was obscured by one of the series' iconic artsy camera angles. I miss them so much. Fighting enemies is quite janky thanks to the tank controls, and it's mostly about positioning, aiming well enough, and firing until the enemy drops, trying not to let them close enough to you by equipping a weapon with just enough stopping power. Combat actually feels more like a diversion from the exploration than the main meat of the game, but it keeps the game interesting. Resident Evil would lose a lot by being just an adventure game. But if you want to know the real reason to play this game, it's the basement theme, obviously. Well worth the play. Oh, and playing it for the memes.
You were almost a Jill sandwich.
Cheesy voice acting, and the intro sequence.
Oh, hi, Mark.
The game has the feel of something trashy that your dad would pick up on the VHS in the 90s because every good movie was already taken. And it rocks that stylistic. It's worth finishing just to experience the glorious ham and cheese, the ingredients needed for the Jill sandwich. Might seem blasphemous as it is a real classic that's also a solid game, but the others are just so much better and loved. Hate. Let me tell you how much I've come to hate this game since I played it back in 2011. There are about 86 billion neurons building my brain, forming over 100 trillion connections. If my whole nervous system would emit a constant biochemical signal containing the word hate through every branch, it would not equal 1/1 billionth of the hate I feel for this game, for the original Persona. Hate. I understand it was the first JRPG released for the console, but was it enough to warrant it being here? It was mediocre at the time of its release. It's even worse now. And guess what? The West received an utterly horrible localization that cuts out like a quarter of the game and is an overall mess. And that's what we deserve, apparently. So many fantastic titles skipped for this. And why? Because of Persona being popular? that the audience will hate it as well, as Revelations Persona is nothing like the new games in the series. You could instead give us translated Innocent Sin if you wanted to go for a classic Persona, as even though its gameplay is still mediocre at best, it would be a great bonus for connoisseurs, seeing that there never was an official translation of the game, for PS1 at least. It's a chore to play. The plot and characters are pretty basic and are bogged down by the horrid translation. There are only two things of value in this trash pile: Mark's crazy dance moves and child abuse. Well, the track, not the act itself. Well, okay, composers did a good job with the soundtrack overall. The setting was somewhat unique, and it was quite atmospheric, but it still doesn't make it worth slogging through it to the finish. And guess what? The remake for PSP, even with the missing content back, better production values, and a more faithful translation, wasn't all that better. This game is just conceptually worthless. Sure, by putting it on PS Classic, they gave the public access to an extremely rare game that is the starting point of one of the biggest JRPG series nowadays. But why would you want to play it? Just to suffer? This game doesn't deserve to be put in the D tier. No, it needs its own tier. So I present to you W. As in, WTF were they thinking, or which is what I would want to say to the person who decided to put it here with the other games. It's just mind-boggling. I've suffered through it 2 times. Once with the original and once with the remake, and it was utterly miserable both times. It's not a wasted slot, it's an insult. And to think that they could just put in, like, the first Suikoden instead. Perhaps one of the most stylish games ever made. I mean, just look at these menus. Hear the transcendent soundtrack prepared under the watchful eye of Hiroshi Okubo, and delve into the absurd, yet charming storylines that motivate you to always go for the first place. Oh, and there's really solid racing waiting for you too. Just so you know. What makes the Ridge Racer driving model so fun to play with is how drift heavy it is, making for spectacular looking moments and amusing failures. And it is so smooth and crisp. And this is a game from 1998. Pure technical wizardry. Like, damn! The main meat of the game is Grand Prix mode, where you choose between 4 racing teams, each with their own plotline, and 4 different car manufacturers to take part in a series of 8 races. Depending on how well you do, you'll unlock different cars, adding up to a whopping 320, plus 1 super special cars. Of course, they are fictional, but still clearly based on existing manufacturers and their designs. It's kind of cute in a way, so it looks like the game has a lot to offer, and don't get me wrong, unlocking every car will take you more than 100 hours, but after 2 or 3 runs through the Grand Prix mode, you'll realize that Ridge Racer Type 4 is just a really nicely dressed up arcade game, and that the real amount of content is actually quite lacking. Again, I enjoyed the narrative aspect of the game and how it changes depending on how well you are doing, the artistic side of the game, or the joy of drifting at 100 miles per hour, but still, there are only 8 tracks that aren't even all that great, and the cars, while numerous, feel very samey with only minor changes. And the game is further hurt by the PS Classic not being packed in with an analog controller. I love this game, it is a true show of master craftsmanship, but there's just not enough to bite into. If it had 8, hell, even 4 more stages, it would be an easy S. But the way it is... Please, don't hate me. I hate myself enough for having to do this. By the way, I'm still shocked that whoever chose the game in their ultimate wisdom didn't choose the original Ridge Racer because it's OG. At least they had a modicum of intelligence. Well, another unorthodox pick. I wonder if the Street Fighter enthusiasts got mad that they've put a puzzle game as their representation of their favorite franchise? But it is a really good puzzle game, and I'm saying that when for a long time I didn't really like it. Puzzle Fighter is a dual puzzler. There are always 2 contenders, and while both are doing their own things at the first sight, clearing colored gems will send some trash blocks to the other side, so their enemies will have to deal with them. It fits thematically and makes for exciting gameplay. It gets really chaotic and stressful quickly, so you can forget about having a relaxing time though. The rules are really simple, and everyone will get them extremely quickly even without the tutorial. You get to stack colored blocks, 2 at a time, on your field so that they are connected to the blocks of the same color, preferably. They don't disappear after filling rows or clumping enough of them together. You have to drop a special detonator of the same color as the blocks you want to get rid of. The more blocks you detonate, the more trash will hit the enemy. If you're skilled enough and prepare detonators of other colors beforehand, you can create chains and screw your enemy even more. Oh, and if you place at least 2x2 blocks of the same color by themselves, they will fuse and become more potent. Fill up your field completely and you'll die. And that's all. It's fast-paced, extremely addicting, and makes for a really good multiplayer game. And there's plenty of stuff to unlock. It is my favorite Street Fighter actually. But putting it into a tier was extremely tough. Originally, I wanted to make it an extremely high B, as it's not something that your mind conjures up when hearing PS1, nor is there some deep PlayStation lore associated with it. Still, it's a quite rare, pricey game that is amazing to play and offers a really good multiplayer experience. After playing the obligatory hour, I craved more for days. And there's Darkstalker's representation. I mean, I think that a low is more than deserved. Actually, as much as I like Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo, I have to put it back in B tier. It's an amazing game, but is it really worth the spot? in the PS Classics. The perfect foil to Metal Gear Solid. While the former is all about being sneaky, Syphon Filter is nearly all about the bombastic action and going guns blazing. Can you believe that some people call it a stealth game? There are only 2 missions where stealth is mandatory, and yet people have that weird vision in their minds. You know how I've said that I was only going to play each game for an hour? Yeah, I guess I missed it that much. But how can you not fall in love with it? It has one of the best first levels of any game. It's so iconic that I actually thought of keeping my footage to just that first stage. But that would be a crime with the amount of various locales you go through in this game. By the way, I was sure that every mission in the game is taking place in the night because the guys at Eidetic didn't want to work themselves too much with skyboxes, but then Romer's stronghold happened, and that sky was beautiful. Sure, the game isn't the best looking, and the characters are a bit goofy when it comes to their models, especially when they are running. I mean, that's I just shit my pants run if I ever seen one. But that's just an inconsequential blemish on an otherwise marvelous game. The music is normally atmospheric. But when the shit hits the fan, it seamlessly changes into an adrenaline-pumping version of itself. I've never really noticed that until now, and I was awestruck. It really keeps you going. You have a metric ton of weapons available to you. There's also a handy sniper mode that changes every gun into a one-shot killing machine, if you're good enough, that is. There's also the true star of this game, the air taser. Simple, satisfying, sadistic. With just one press of a button, which you have to keep pressed, it will fry the bad guy while he is screaming to the heavens. There's a certain beauty in being messed up, and you'll have many more occasions for this during the game, like using chemical weaponry or killing unarmed targets in cold blood. The game also has perhaps the most sensible damage system out of any action game, as you recklessly wander around the battlefield trading shots with terrorists. A gauge under your health bar will appear and fill up. The speed of that process depends on the number of enemies, whether there's any cover between you and them, and what weapons they are using at the moment. If it fills up completely, you'll start taking damage, first losing your flak jacket, and if you let it drain completely, then your health itself. And unarmored people in this game are very brittle. As the game goes on, more and more enemies will also wear flak jackets, and if you manage to kill them without destroying it, for example with a headshot, you'll be able to collect it. Great system that promotes skill over the use of auto-targeting, which is a really helpful crutch in the beginning of the game, but slowly loses its usefulness as the game goes on, although never completely. It is perfectly balanced, as everything should be. You are able to roll away to reduce the danger too, if you want to be more aggressive instead of camping passively. And yeah, gunfights are pretty rad, as guns are satisfying to use and there are a lot of them. Also, I would want to introduce the
Houdina's patented gun fun test.
trademarked. If the game has a shotgun or an equivalent of it, and it is satisfying to use, then you know that the game has good gunplay. Seriously, there wasn't a good shooter that had a weak-ass shotgun, ever. It needs to have a proper kick, great sound, and enough power to send guys flying or dismember them. Luckily, Syphon Filter's shotguns meet the criteria, outside of being able to dismember, sadly. There are a lot of different objectives during the missions, and finishing one always will give you a checkpoint. What can be tough is that as the levels tend to be vast, you can miss something crucial to finishing an objective and have to backtrack, sometimes even to the beginning of the level, searching for that last lousy thing. Because without it, the game won't let you pass to the next level. The gameplay is tight and enjoyable, visuals and music are adequate, but what about the story? Oh, let me tell you something, brother. While it is pretty straightforward at first, just like an action flick for dads, it quickly becomes filled with twists, betrayals, hidden agendas, and all the good stuff. Basically, there is this virus that was engineered in a lab to cool the world's population by removing certain undesirables. It's in the hands of crazy terrorists. Go beat them and stop the doomsday now! To get the whole picture you have to play the second game, not included in PlayStation Classic, which is a straightforward continuation and more of the same. Not that it's a bad thing or anything, no! Playing them back to back really makes for a complete Syphon Filter experience, and it's glorious. You don't need to play Syphon Filter 3. I mean, it's fine gameplay wise, but still kind of lacking. And the plot is pretty much a filler made from various flashbacks. This game and the movie Outbreak nearly made me pursue virology. Biological warfare is such a cool and obscure subject. Too bad that after a certain event, I'm pretty sure there won't be many games involving viri. But hey, other things like prions or parasites are still fair game, no? Anyway, while Syphon Filter isn't a super mainline game, it is still an amazing exclusive for PS1 that even after all this time plays great. And I feel that PS Classic really needed a game like this in its library. It is going to be super controversial, but it deserves to be with the big leagues in the S tier, even if it has limited longevity. You'll be going back to this game from time to time. Believe me, I've been there. It's that fun to play. Yes, omitting this one would cause riots on the streets everywhere. Tekken is THE PlayStation's fighting game, the king of parties, and a really great single player experience with tons of characters to unlock and different modes to play. Personally, I prefer Tekken's 2 gameplay and character roster, but that's just because I've spent so much more time with that installment. Tekken 3 is objectively better on nearly every level, no questions asked, The graphics are as good as the PS1 allows them to be, the movement was refined and now there's more emphasis on sidestepping, while jumping isn't as ridiculous as it used to be. The CPU is smarter and everything feels just way more polished. Okay, maybe music isn't as amazing and diverse as it was in 2, but there are still a lot of bangers. As the game takes place 20 years after Tekken 2, many characters were axed and replaced by newcomers who sometimes fight suspiciously similar. But the new roster is great, even if a bit smaller than previously. Everybody should find someone they will gel with. Or just pick Eddie and randomly mash buttons, wrecking the opposition, making them want to crucify you. That's a possibility too. Capoeira fighters in Tekken are my personal trauma. Outside the standard modes like arcade, time trial or survival, there's my favorite, Team Battle, where you create your team with each character acting as a life while trying to zero the enemy team. There's also Tekken Force, which is a side-scrolling beat-em up, and Tekken Ball, which is battle volleyball. They make for nice distractions from the main meal that is the combo of arcade and survival. Of all PS Classic games that can be played in multiplayer, this will be the one. Tekken 3 is well deserving of its spot on the list, but why the hell have they picked the dreaded PAL version? The loss of those 10 frames of animation is really noticeable and hurts this otherwise outstanding title. So while it is an I have to put a minus next to it. Thanks, Obama. Okay, if you had any idea about the PS Classic, I'm sure that you were waiting for this moment, for me to rip this pic into shreds, and doing that would be entirely deserved. Even back then, when I thought that Sony could do no wrong, oh how naive I were. When I noticed that this game was being included, I was like, what the hell were they smoking? I still stand by this.
Hej ty, wreszcie się obudziłeś.
Rainbow Six is just such a random pick that no one would put into any compilation, especially not one called PlayStation Classic. If they wanted a shooter, there are many of them in the library, and nearly all of them are way better. What's even funnier is that it is the only licensed game for the international PS Classic, that is, showing that they could get nearly everything. But no, they didn't. They wanted to present us with a horrible port of a brilliant game. It belongs to the tier, even more than a Revelations Persona, and I'm saying that even though I hate that game like nothing else in this world.
Before going further with my not so mini review of Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six for the original PlayStation, I would like to present you with a new segment, Hodyna's Super Book Club. Please excuse the excessive video cutting, but like every book critic worth their salt, I too enjoy a little bit of drinking of higher spirits when reading my books. The book for today is the political/military thriller by the man himself, with the title that you probably guessed already. It's a second book in a series about John Clark, who now became the titular Rainbow Six. The book is about the formation and start of an international counter-terrorist group called Rainbow. Their operations around the world described with meticulous attention to detail, typical for Tom Clancy, and the grand doomsday plot organized by a group of crazy eco-terrorists. It's quite horrifying how well Mr. Clancy foresaw the radicalization of various groups who are thinking that they are in the right and their cause is just. But yet, in the end, they are just manipulated by the powerful, influential people standing on the top of the food chain. Well, at least our eco-terrorists are just annoying and causing meaningless nuisance. Then again, if Greta Thunberg could, she would also release a genetically modified strain of Ebola to wipe us out, to save the planet.
How dare you!
Tom Clancy knew 5 years before she was even born. As with every book by Tom Clancy, it is quite a doorstopper that will take you many evenings and drinks to finish, and yet every page actually feels really meaningful, whether the author is building up the stage for the future events, describing the characters' inner monologues, or, well, going to the fast-paced action itself. Perhaps my favorite thing about it is how the preparation phase takes 30-40 pages and then it's all resolved in one page, as the whole action takes a couple of seconds in real time, because, well, there's no room for tardiness when it comes to special forces. To be honest, this book could be used as a handbook for running a paramilitary organization. So if you're into that thing, well, you won't find anything better, I assure you. It also touches about few subjects that will leave you thinking long after you're done with the book itself. And then it will make you crave for the other books in the series. While they are good, some are actually very good. Personally, I think that Rainbow Six is Clancy's finest work. Strong, likable characters, great descriptions, overarching plot, emotions. Rainbow Six just has it all. It gets my highest recommendation.
Alongside the book, a game was developed. Originally, Red Storm Entertainment wanted to make a game about the FBI rescuing hostages, but wanting to get more international appeal, they changed it into a multinational counter-terrorist unit. Contacting the popular author Tom Clancy, they've secured the license for the organization and some characters from the book. There are some plot tidbits from the game's namesake, but it isn't a direct retelling at all, which makes sense seeing how both book and the game were made separately at the same time. The PC version had an extensive planning phase where, after choosing members for each squad and their equipment, one could plan their actions, including very detailed step-by-step movement, and then watch it resolve by the computer. The AI was far from perfect, and your operatives prioritized movement over shooting the enemies, which often caused their demise. A lot more effective way of playing was directly controlling one Rainbow member, with the others simply supporting them. It was also infinitely more engaging. Though seeing your brilliant plan successfully resolved was perhaps even more satisfying and more fitting for the title. The game was incredibly tough, but also extremely well put together and playable. The critical reception definitely reflected that. 1 year later, the PS1 port made by Rebellion was released, and it was rough, to say the least. With PS1 being much less powerful, the developer team was forced to downscale the game quite significantly. First thing, the graphic fidelity had to be lowered, making everything, starting from rooms to the actual human models, incredibly uncanny. Seriously, there's this overwhelming liminal space aesthetic when you go through the locations. Everything feels so weirdly empty and bright. It's downright unsettling. Second thing, the planning is completely gone. You can still outfit your team members and select their starting points, but that's all. Thirdly, you have only 3 people at your disposal each mission, instead of 8. You can team up and make them follow you, but they are still more like extra lives than companions, to be honest. Lastly, the game was made for keyboard and mouse, and while they've managed to make a really sensible control scheme, with one of the trigger buttons acting like a shift key, allowing to nearly double the amount of functions that could be done in combination with other buttons, it takes a lot of time and practice to learn it by heart, and the horrible tutorial doesn't really touch upon 90% of things you need to know to be effective, or even play the game at all. The whole deal with controls is also another thing that makes Rainbow Six's presence on the PlayStation Classics roster extremely puzzling. You see, when using a DualShock, the game has actually quite great and well thought out control scheme. Like, it's something that's straight up lifted from a modern console shooter. The left analog stick is for walking, the right is for aiming, and the now freed directional buttons allow for more functions like switching weapons. And it did it all before Alien Resurrection, the game that many point out as the precursor of the modern FPS controls. DualShock makes the game so much better to play. So PlayStation Classic not only hampers the game by using the PAL ROM, but also enforces an inferior control scheme. Also, Rainbow Six made me realize that I'm a fake PS1 fan. My whole life I thought that R3 and L3 buttons were the invention of DualShock 2, while they were present from the start. You can just press the sticks on the original DualShock as well. The game is tough. If you get spotted, the enemies will start shooting very quickly, and your men are as vulnerable to gunfire as the enemies. 3 shots and you're gone. Heavy armor doesn't really help too much, which, I mean, it makes sense. Nearly every enemy uses a high caliber assault rifle, which, in combination with sustained fire, tears any personal armor as if it was made of paper. This adds up to the horror feeling. You walk around the spooky mansion's bases, minding your own business, and then you're jump scared by the scariest monster existing, the other man. And then you die, because aiming is really imprecise and auto-aim isn't helpful at all. The main source of frustration are the enemies that are on either a higher or lower level. It's annoying, but can be manageable using DualShock, but on a normal pad, yeah, you'll die because you can't really fight that enemy unless you stun them with a flashbang. You don't have many weapons or tools, but all of them are useful. Remember to have a heartbeat monitor on at least one operative. It makes the game much less frustrating, as you'll be able to predict where enemies are and thus be able to surprise them. It does ruin the horror aspect a bit though. There is a thing that puzzles me. Why would you ever go for a non-silenced weapon? It's not like it lowers your damage and anyone goes down with just a few shots anyway, while it can save the life of a hostage. Because yeah, if an innocent dies, you'll have to repeat the mission from the start. While the operation theaters are vast, albeit not as large as in the PC original, each mission will take from 5 to 10 minutes at most. Though, thanks to the stress you'll endure picking from every corner possible, it will feel like they go on for a lot longer. Sometimes it will make you become careless and you'll pay for it with the lives of your men, or just be forced to reset the mission. Death is permanent in Rainbow Six, and losing good operatives hurts, as each one is proficient in something, or at everything. Lost ones are replaced by these gas-masked no-names with terrible stats. And hey, if you read the book, losing Ding Chavez will be extra hurtful. By the way, the original version had more operatives, and there were also women. But you know what's super embarrassing? There were 2 other ports, one for Nintendo 64 and one for Dreamcast. The Nintendo 64 is surprisingly faithful, keeping most things from the original, including planning and team play, but with 12 levels compared to PC's 16, PlayStation is only missing 2 from the latter part of the game, but as I've said, the levels were redesigned quite a bit. In contrast to other ports, the one for Dreamcast is nearly a perfect PC port and includes 5 missions from the Eagle Watch expansion. Damn, I never realized how much more powerful the N64 was compared to PS1. Good thing they ran with the cartridges, huh? Anyway, even though most missions will be about bringing hostages to safety, there's some objective variety. Sometimes you'll be defusing some bombs, other times downloading very important files from a computer, or just finding and killing every terrorist on the level. Because yeah, if it isn't directly stated in the mission objectives, you can just leave some enemies alive if they don't interfere with your route. For me, it's asking for trouble. But you do you. Stealth is an option apparently. Combat isn't too complicated and mostly comes down to who surprised whom and the number of combatants on each side. There are not a lot of weapons, they all feel pretty much the same. The shotgun is rather meh, although it is powerful enough to blow everyone away in one shot. The AI is a mixed bag. Enemies keep to their patrolling routes mostly, but when they encounter a source of noise, be it a shootout or just the sound of your men running around the place, they will investigate. They have no sense of self-preservation though, and will just storm through the door to their doom, even if their comrade just died there before their eyes. If the terrorist is around a hostage and gets agitated, well, the hostage gets a shot to the head and you have to try again. Their aggressiveness increases with the chosen level of difficulty. On the other side, hostages, and to a lesser degree your teammates when you're not controlling them, are completely brain dead. And if you order them to follow you into a narrow corridor, they will just block you. There isn't much difference between normal and hard difficulty. Outside of terrorists being more trigger happy, but on easy or recruit, each mission has fewer objectives and enemies. It's cute that they actually included those changes, but if you're going to play, just do yourself a favor and omit that option. It makes the game feel incomplete. There isn't much when it comes to music, but when it does play, it's good, really good. Just be prepared to hear the somber notes of failure play quite often for the first hour or 3. It makes the victory theme much more uplifting though. It's a tough game to bite into. You'll be making stupid mistakes, like forgetting that you left your hurt guy somewhere after you changed to a healthy one, and getting spooked and killing the first one because you forgot he was there.
Oops.
But once the mechanics click with you, you'll be running near perfect operations, until the game will throw a sudden curveball at you once you get too full of yourself. Even if the game is just a shell of the PC original, it still has those glimmers of a great game. Too bad that you have to constantly squint to actually see them. Personally, I strangely like it, and I would call it overhated. I've spent more than the obligatory hour with this game, and I had my fun. Mixed with a lot of frustration, but the good kind. Try it for yourself. Seriously. The learning curve, the one-of-a-kind atmosphere made real thanks to the imperfect graphics, and the satisfaction once everything starts falling into place. Make for the weirdest action game you'll ever play on the PS1, that's for sure. I wouldn't be myself if I didn't waste more of your time by dropping a recommendation, but Rainbow Six 3, the console's version, not the PC's Raven Shield, but that's also really good, is outstanding. Sure, it is a lot more action-based and the plot is kinda but the game itself is simply amazing. You have a lot of tools and tactics to use, and you get to hang out with the best boys there are. It truly is the perfect blend of tactical gameplay that isn't too obtuse, and enough action to make it a spectacle, and perhaps lure new fans. From start to finish, it is just a great fun. I love the game so much that I actually have 2 copies of it. And there's like a third one for PS2 lying somewhere around. Recommendation. And you know what? I was wrong. The PS1 port of the original game isn't a shell of the PC game. It was just a try to actionize it without losing its spirit, like Rainbow Six 3. And they did that well, to a degree. So I wanted to say, screw you to everyone who pointlessly hated this game. It's fine, and once you adapt to its quirks, you'll want to finish it. Enough said, still doesn't belong to PlayStation Classic though. Another familiar name, the propagator of the weaponized car combat genre, and it was very playable and impressive back at the time of its release, near the launch of PlayStation, the keyword being wars. Twisted Metal has the same problem as the other games from the earliest days of the first PlayStation. They still have the very simplistic arcade structure with little or nothing other than a few stages and the raw gameplay. And the problem is that more often than not, just like with Twisted Metal's colleagues from 95 and early 96, the gameplay is really rough and the product isn't all that refined yet. And that was fine back then when the concept was fresh and people didn't have all that much to choose from. But the sequel, World Tour, has made the original Twisted Metal pretty much obsolete. The audio visuals are fine, controls are serviceable, and the core gameplay, despite being basic, still works. But the meat itself, the combat, is really awkward and, dare I say, not too fun. Arenas are vast and have their secrets, but most of the time there will be a lot of downtime where you'll ride searching for an opponent to battle, and then you'll just ram into them, unload every weapon you have, probably miss some and simply ride away. Opponents aren't all that smart and are mostly focused on getting you, so it's pretty much one against everyone else. It was funny to see them kill themselves by falling into bottomless pits though.
Sounds good to me, baby!
The game is tough. Even with repair stations peppered around the levels, you just don't have much in the way of protecting yourself or strategizing. Well, at least there's a password system. And after clearing 6 levels and defeating the final boss, you get the classic ending where the host of the tournament, Calypso, gives the winner whatever they want, most of the time screwing them completely Monkey Paw style. Too bad that here it is purely text-based, especially with the fact that they've made FMV endings, but never included them. PS Classic could have been the way to include them back, but nope, let's just put a ROM of the game into our emulator box and call it a day. I just wish we could play the sequel instead, as that game was really good and perfected everything from what essentially was a glorified prototype. It is a classic PS1 game, but it's the weakest in the series. There! I've said it. Still, its impact and the fact that you can have pretty fun duels with another person warrant it a very distant place in the C tier. A game that I've finished about a year before writing this script, and I'm glad as it's extremely hard to gauge a JRPG after just a single hour. Wild Arms is a Sony exclusive series that's mostly known for its Wild West inspired setting, with little troubled towns and daring gunslingers rootin' and tootin' when it's high noon. All that with a soundtrack where if you told me it was composed by Ennio Morricone, I would believe you, no questions asked. But it's actually way more than that. The story, while quite simple for a JRPG, still remains an engaging and fun romp, and you interact a lot with environments and objects strewn around towns and dungeons. Sure, there are numerous random and obligatory battles that are turn-based. The battle system is painfully simplistic, but also has some cool elements, like ammo being an actual resource, or force gauge that charges up as you attack and get attacked, and then can be spent on special actions. Fights are meh, and extremely basic, even for JRPG standards. Outside of them though, with how interactive environments are, you'll really feel like a part of a group of adventurers on a fantastic journey for thrills and treasure. There are 3 protagonists, each one with different goals and background, who often get split up, allowing you to experience the story from their individual perspectives. But in the end, fate always brings them together to uncover the main plot. The game will take you about 30 hours from start to finish, and it will be an enjoyable time. If someone would want to start the adventure with the genre, Wild Arms is a really good title for that. Well made, with all the staple mechanics, and it isn't too overwhelming. A true classic JRPG, for better and for worse. I don't even know what to say other than it's good. I prefer the PS2 titles from this series, but the original is still really solid. Thusly, I find that its place in the tier is more than adequate. And that's every title lying inside the international version of PS Classic, because Japanese one has 8 different games, replacing most of the action titles with JRPGs and shmups. But I'll mention that in the second part of the video, because let's face it, I'm tired, you're tired, and this video is long enough anyway. God damn it, Snake! In the second part, outside of looking at the Japanese classic, I'll ponder about how they could made this mini-console better, or at least not as much of a failure as it is, including changes to the 20 chosen games, present my ideas for expansions with their additional games, and present my one and only 20 games I would put in for just myself. Be sure to share your thoughts. I'm really interested which 20 games you would privately put on your custom box if you had a chance. Overall, the list was much better than I remembered it to be. But then again, as my best friend often says about me, I just like video games way too much. Yeah, there are a few obviously misplaced games that shouldn't be there, but in most cases I could see why they were put in. I have to say, I don't know how people are able to make these tier list videos, having to actually rate which PS1 games are good and which aren't, probably cut my lifespan by like 1 year. Then again, who wants to live forever? For now, this is all. See you in part 2. Or not, who knows.